Okay. Um, so yeah. Um, Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Venture Insights with Saul Singer, the man who coined the term Startup Nation and the co-author of Startup Nation and the Genius of Israel. And today we'll explore the innovation, creativity, and resilience and values driving Israel's success. So thank you very much. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, can you speak? Just we'll see that we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi, Eran.
Hey, good evening. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Um, just before we start, like a quick introduction about myself. My name is Eran Savir, and I'm the founder and managing partner of Savion Ventures. We're a seed stage fund, and we're investing in AI, digital, and commerce startups. Savion is my third fund, and before becoming an investor, I was a founder myself. I founded three startups, two of which were acquired, and we're hosting these webinars every few weeks just to share some insights from founders, investors, and industry experts, helping you stay ahead of tech and venture and things that happen in the ecosystem. Just a quick disclaimer before we start. The content presented today is not directed to any investors or potential investors and does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. And now that we have this off the table, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. And also, please feel free to ask questions also in the chat. We will take questions towards the end of the session, and we will take few questions from the audience. So please go ahead and you can already start putting down your questions there. The session today will be divided into two different sections or parts. The first one is going to be a presentation that presented by Saul, and the second part is going to be questions. Some of them are questions that I prepared, and some we'll take from the audience. So just before we start, like here's a proper introduction of Saul. So I'm very excited to welcome Saul Singer, the man who coined the term Startup Nation and helped the world understand Israel's unique innovation story. Saul is the co-author, along with Dan Senor, of the international bestseller Startup Nation and the Genius of Israel. The Startup Nation, that's the book. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah, so that's the book. And so the Startup Nation became a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, translated into over 35 languages, and the phrase itself has become synonymous with Israel's tech-driven success. His latest book, The Genius of Israel, which I have here in Hebrew, but it's written originally in English, explores the surprising resilience and cohesion behind that success, especially relevant in light of the recent challenges. And the New York Times wrote, if Israel recovers from the brutal Hamas attack on October 7th, this book will help reveal how they did it. So originally from the US, Saul made Aliyah in 1994 and lives in Israel. We're honored to have him with us today and explore what's next for Israel as a global innovation powerhouse. Once again, Saul, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Eran. It's good to be here. I'm excited to share these thoughts with your audience. A very startup nation-y audience, from what I can tell, a lot of investors and entrepreneurs, and so it's I feel at home with your audience. So, but I want to talk today about what actually I think is the most difficult crisis of the modern world, And, we think there are a lot of crises right now. There's climate change, there's polarization, there's geopolitics, there's all kinds of things. But to me, the biggest crisis really is the one that we don't have such a good solution for, and that's been getting worse for decades. And that is the crisis of mental health. I would call it a crisis of meaning of the modern world. And the book that we just wrote, The Genius of Israel, and the subtitle is The Surprising Resilience of a Divided Nation in a Turbulent World, um, really speaks to that. It's like, what does Israel have to offer? How is Israel different in this modern crisis? And I'll just share my screen, a little presentation here. And I'll try to make it full screen now. Seems to take a second when I do
Yeah.
this.
I'll let you know when you see it full screen. Right. Okay, yeah, we can see it full screen.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, there are a lot of metrics that you can look at to show this kind of crisis. In the US, teen suicides have been rising dramatically. Anxiety disorders, you look at college students, the number of people, designated with a mental health issue is something like one in five in many modern countries. It really, and they talk about an epidemic of loneliness and so on. But when Dan and I started writing this book, what we wanted to know is Israel different? Where does Israel stand in this situation? And so the statistic that we found that we looked at is something called deaths of despair. In the United States, there is this term called deaths of despair, which is basically death from three causes: from suicide, or from alcohol abuse, or drug abuse, substance abuse. You take all of those deaths together, and that's called deaths of despair. And it turns out when you look at the whole OECD together, you compare them, we have these statistics, you can see that Israel is the lowest among all of these rich countries. And that really struck us because, a lot of people have heard of the World Happiness Report and the strange thing that Israel is so high in these happiness rankings. Actually, we're still in the top 10, according to the most recent report. And the top countries, the other 9 countries, are basically the Scandinavian countries, places like Sweden and Denmark and Finland. But if you look at this thing of deaths of despair, we have half the amount of Sweden, a third the amount of Denmark, and about a quarter that of the United States. This is a very significant difference. And you can't say it's because everything's roses here. You can't say it's because we have such a great, economic situation or political situation or security situation. This is not Sweden here. So how is this that we rank so high in happiness, whether that makes sense or not, whether that's true or not right now? But on the other issue, which we can really quantify, we're definitely in the best position. Now, how do I go to the next slide? Okay. Yeah. So we looked at all kinds of metrics. Okay. We're trying to figure out, how does Israel stand out? Is this real? is this just something that we're imagining? We know Israeli society, it feels very different, but how does it measurably different? And the biggest, to me, in a way, the way that Israel breaks the iron law of demography is this issue of the fertility rate. Because every rich country has dropped below 2.1. You see this chart just shows a few of the countries, but it's basically the whole rich world is below replacement. That's what it's called. And Israel's not just a little bit above. Israel's double the OECD average, which is about 1.6, and we're at about 3. And it's not just the Haredim, okay? Because I know that's what everybody thinks, but it's not the Haredim, because we know if we look around in Tel Aviv or wherever we live, the normal number of kids in Israel is 3. 2 is a little bit small, 4 is a little bit big. You get extra credit if you have 4 kids, which itself is very telling that's considered a social benefit if you have 4 kids. So this is not just the Haredim by any stretch. And this has very, very significant impacts on society, because if you're above replacement, it means you're young and growing. And if you're below replacement, it means you're aging and shrinking. And here you see this aging phenomena where, wait, I'll just go back. It's really striking that Israel is, of course, the lowest median age among these countries, but it's by 2050, it's going to be about 25. We're going to be 25 years older than Korea. It's insane. And this is whoops, what happened here? Do you see me, or do you see the?
We can still see the presentation.
Okay.
The median age slide.
Okay, I lost the presentation myself, but oh, now can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So here you have these are population pyramids. It just shows how many young people versus how many at each age, how many people are there. And Israel in 2050 on the left, Japan on the right. It's the exact opposite. So the question is why? We looked at, there were many other statistics, but that's just a taste of how Israel is so materially different. And there really are many, many reasons. But I think that the core of it is that we're better at human connection. And our Israeli society is telling us all the time that you're part of something larger than yourself. And this gives us meaning. It is why when we wrote Startup Nation, that when we talked to all these people around the world, high-tech people who came here, and the first impression they had is Israel is a country, you can feel that it's a country with a purpose. And these things are very good for mental health. And you can break it down. I mean, we have larger families, we have incredible friendship networks. I mean, we have 3 kids who were born in Israel, and I'm always amazed by how many friends they're in touch with from how many different circles, from school, from Sofim, from the army, from Mechina, from, all of these different circles. And they stay in touch basically with all of them. They go hiking with this one and camping with that one, and travel to Thailand with the another one. And it's just really impressive. And you don't have that in other countries to the same degree. But when I drill down on this, I think a lot of it has to do with individualism versus society and community. This is the historian Paul Johnson, who wrote a book called The History of the Jews. And Jonathan Sacks, the famous rabbi, asked him, "So what did you learn from writing this history about the Jews?" And he said, basically, the Jews managed to do something very unique, which is there are individualistic societies, like, say, the United States. And then there's more collectivist societies, like the societies of the East. But what the Jewish people has managed to do is to have this balance between individualism and collective responsibility. And I think that Israel has actually taken that thing that we've had that's maybe allowed us to survive for 2,000 years in exile, this kind of ability to do this. We've taken that as Israelis and doubled down on it. We're constantly trying to reinforce it. Um, for instance, we have a chapter in the book that's just about the word gibush. Um, those of you who aren't Hebrew speakers, kibush is a very hard word to translate into English. You can kind of call it team building and things like that, but there's nothing like the emotional weight of the word in Israeli society. And basically, we're doing kibush all the time in Israel, starting with, first graders in class. We came from the United States, and we were very surprised to find out in school that there was a crisis in our kids' classroom, and the crisis was akita lo megubeshet, which you know, which means the class is not unified, and in the U.S. that's not even a thing. It's not even a possibility. It's not even a concept. And here it's more important than what you actually learn in the class, and it just goes on and on. Um, And this really is another way of looking at it, is that this is from Sebastian Junger, who's a kind of a war correspondent, has written many books. And um, it's one you can be very stressed. You can even have to fight in wars. You can have not be so sure about your security. Um, but if you want to kind of destroy people, you make them not feel necessary. And Israeli society, I mean, what he says is that modern society has perfected the art of making people feel not necessary. And I think you could say that Israel has kind of perfected the opposite. Everybody is necessary here, literally necessary to physically defend the country, and that we participate in this. This again is not something that other societies go through, and I think it makes a big difference that we feel that we're necessary and part of something larger than ourselves. Um, Now, right now, we have a big problem that we've seen in the past couple years, that our society is very healthy, but our institutions failed us. And this is not a political point. I think that you can see the failure of our institutions in this chart, where this is a chart of the trust in various institutions. And the Army is at the top, 75% or so. And this is even true, whether it was before the war or after the war started, that trust has been very high. Next is the president of the country. And as you go down, of course, at the bottom, you have politics, and you have the government, and you have the media. Um, but even the Supreme Court is well below 50%, and that's not healthy. We need all of these to be above 50%, and there's really a lot of work to do. Um, but if you had to choose between a healthy society, let's say between a weak society and strong institutions, or a strong society and weak institutions, I'd much rather have a strong society and weak institutions, because a society is much harder to fix than institutions. A healthy society can fix institutions. Just having great institutions is not going to fix society. Um, so that's really our task going forward. And just stop sharing here. And this is very, very relevant to the conversation about innovation. Um, I think what you've seen here, and any of you who are in high tech in Israel, whether you're an investor or whatever, however you're involved in tech in Israel, I'm sure that you've felt that the sense of purpose that Israeli entrepreneurs feel was high before, that motivation to kind of not just succeed, but to do something for your country, and that your success was part of what you're giving your country. That's just multiplying. I think people have come back from hundreds of days of Miluim, um, and they've actually, I've heard this time and again, and a friend of mine is actually starting an organization to help people with this phenomenon, which is they come back and they can't just go back to their old job. They feel like they have to do something more meaningful. They have to contribute even more. They have to work even harder. They have to be even more successful. And so that's why I think a lot of investors who know Israel very well are actually thinking that we are going to have, that this is actually the best time to invest in Israel, that we are going to have, once we kind of get out of this current crisis, um, we are going to have a boom in terms of innovation and in terms of the strength of the sector. And even during the war, it's been incredible that the amount of venture capital coming in is basically back to, roughly pre-bubble levels, say 2019. I think it's like $10 billion in 2024, which is, way up there. Did not shrink dramatically because of the situation. Um, and that's going to continue. I think that in this world of AI that we are in and going into, Israel's well positioned. Um, we can talk more about that, but it's not really about engineering skills and things like that. It's never been about that. It's always been about a sense of mission, an ability to work together in teams, a credible determination. All of these kind of factors that are hard to put your finger on, the factors that we talked about in Startup Nation, but are now, I think, coming back even stronger. And of course, we saw the Wiz exit during the war, but I really think, and this is kind of what we've seen. I know I'm anticipating one of Iran's questions, um, but if you look at the trajectory of Israeli tech since, let's say, 2010, roughly when the Startup Nation came out, um, the companies have been getting bigger. The ambitions have been getting bigger. Waze was sold for $1 billion, and that was considered a huge accomplishment. Now, $1 billion is not a huge valuation for Israeli companies. Now it's 5 or 10 or 32. Um, and I think maybe the big impact of the Wiz exit is that now people are really thinking even more about $100 billion companies coming out of Israel. So the sights have been set higher and higher over time, and our ability to meet those sights has gone higher and higher over time. So I'm very bullish about the future of Israeli tech. I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and the great introduction about the Israel and what has happened. Um, you briefly touched about what has happened since you coined the term startup nation, which was over like a decade ago. And so, but you just run forward to, I mean, you just talked about, how did the economy or Israel has evolved, how has the ecosystem evolved since then? But I want to ask you about Israel. I mean, Israel has long been like a leader in deep tech and defense-driven innovation, but also in online and digital technology. So as AI becomes like increasingly central to global tech, um, I mean, both in infrastructure and consumer-facing application, how do you see Israel positioning itself in the evolving landscape around that?
Well, it's all a lot of it has really come down to the ability to leverage AI, the ability to, I've heard AI compared to electricity in the sense that, when electricity came along, we just sprinkled electricity on everything. Everything became electric. So now that AI has come along, we're sprinkling it on everything. Um, and we're, I think, very good at that. This is a sweet spot for us to do this. We've literally have thousands of AI startups either completely or central about AI or integrating. Um, so I think we're going to be strong in that. I think um, there there are serious people Israelis who believe that we can be more of a leader in AI. Or there's some are worried that we are falling behind, because we're not producing these major models. Like though we do have AI 21 has its own model, um, but uh, I think we um, are well positioned, but there are things that we could do to kind of ensure and really move forward in a more kind of leadership role in the world, not just kind of do well. Um, I think that's a possibility. I don't know if it's going to happen because I think it will take a lot of work. It's not just the ecosystem that can do it. So whether that happens or not, I don't know. But I think we're we're well positioned in this kind of AI world we're going into.
Yeah, by the way, there is a research that says that Israel is ranked number one globally in unicorns per capita. And when it comes to like AI startups, Israel is number one in AI startups per capita and three in generative AI development and investment in AI in the world. So I guess we're positioned quite well, but of course we can always, I guess, improve. Um, I wanted to ask you about the things that happened since October 7th. So I mean that has been, of course, a major event in Israel. So since October 7th, how have the events reshaped Israel's tech ecosystem from the mindset of the founders to the pace of and also direction of innovation?
Yeah. Well, one kind of a very obvious thing, not necessarily the most important, is defense tech, of course, has jumped up a lot globally and in Israel. Um, but uh, I think again that the biggest factor is not is more social and personal. It's this determination to contribute more. It's the determination to have a bigger impact on the world and on your country. First of all, I think that the fact that Israelis have that strongly even before the war is very important. That's not necessarily true in other places. for as many entrepreneurs as it is in Israel. Um, but I think, for example, I think the tech ecosystem here has realized that it has to be active, not just in, say, a lot of tech companies were saying, okay, we're going to try to increase diversity in the ecosystem. We'll have more Haredim and Arabs and things like that, and education programs and all that. All that's great, but now I think the tech community is taking more ownership on its role in society, um, not just citizens of the world kind of thing. Um, and I think that's very important and very healthy for Israel as a whole.
I couldn't agree more. So, despite its size and regional challenges, Israel continues to attract significant global investments, particularly at the early stages. And what are the most critical factors that make Israeli startups stand out in the global venture landscape? And how can investors best understand and leverage these advantages to maximize long-term returns?
The advantages of
of like Israel and the talent and
oh,
the
yeah. So um, actually one interesting aspect that's also AI related is actually Amnon Shashua just started another AI company called Double AI. I don't know if you've heard. And that company, like also like the one started by Ilya Stutzkever, Safe Superintelligence, DeepMind before it was bought, by Google. These companies just had a few people. It's not the numbers of people that necessarily matter or the billions that you throw at it. I mean, in the AI world, even at the cutting edge, even when it comes to the fundamental breakthroughs, it's not necessarily large numbers of people that do it. And in that situation, Israel is kind of on a level playing field with the biggest companies and the biggest countries. And, we're really good at uh, all kinds of kind of, I hate the word out of the box, it's used so much, but creative thinking that's based on, combining multiple disciplines, just asking questions that people didn't ask. I mean, you look at the Israeli science at the Weizmann Institute and places like that, and they're just super productive and super creative and super successful. And that same kind of mindset, I think, in the AI world, that actually scientific mindset of kind of looking new directions and questioning and finding solutions, that Israeli talent has become more and more important and can actually take us to levels that would be surprising. So in a way, our small size ironically could be matter less, and that's very strange in a world where everybody's saying, oh, you need 50 billion, 100 billion, $1 trillion, you need to build these enormous data centers and so on. It is not at all clear that that's where the real breakthrough, the next big breakthrough is going to come from.
And one thing we also talked about it, when we prepared ourselves for this call, before the Startup Nation, like before the book Startup Nation, I guess much of the world and even Israelis themselves, I think we struggled to articulate what truly drives the country's strengths and uniqueness and tech success. So, what deeper, less visible forces does the genius of Israel, like in your book, reveal about Israel's enduring resilience and creativity?
So, we have shown, I think While we're understandably focused on the catastrophic failures of October 7th, the amount of resilience that we showed as a society in those first days, both all the soldiers who ran to the front, but also the entire ORF, the entire society, just essentially rose up and completely took the place of the government that had just kind of collapsed. All of the systems had collapsed. Nothing was working. And everybody just rushed in and took control and took responsibility in a way that we take for granted, but I don't think any other country could have done. A, and B, that I'm not sure that any of us would have predicted on October 6th that we would be able to do that. I don't think Sinwar predicted that we would be able to do that. Um, so um, I think that those kind of talents, again, that get back to the strong society. Modern societies around the world are getting weaker and sicker. And I think it's because that there is just one side of the balance. There's individualism and there's nothing to balance it. And people are just getting more and more individualistic, and they don't even think it's, a problem. They don't see anything missing. One of the things that strikes me about Israelis is that, we always complain. In every generation, we complain about losing our solidarity. Certainly now. Um, But nobody complains about that in other countries because they don't even have the concept of solidarity. They don't have the experience of solidarity. They don't have the aspiration for solidarity. And we know what it feels like. We know how to build it. And we miss it terribly if we're losing it. And I think that there's a sense now, there's determination, particularly among the generation that fought, and not just the ones inside, everybody else on the outside, the generation, which is the hundreds of thousands of Miluimnikim, are the center of an entire generation that's affected by this. Everybody's family, everybody has connection. Um, and there's this sense that we need to essentially kind of refound the country, that we need, that this is a kind of pioneering moment, that we were reminded, in every generation, we're about the fourth generation from the pioneers that founded the country. And in each generation, you get farther and farther from the memory of what it's like not to have a country. And you get more and more kind of not appreciative or lax or thinking that, you don't have to do anything. We've been thrown back to the pioneering generation because we experience what it's like not to have a country for one day and what happened.
Yeah, so I very much agree on that, and I think that's kind of I guess an optimistic, the optimistic side of the things that happen. But you also mentioned about when we talked about the internal divisions and things that we've seen in recent years happening in Israel. Can these tensions like in the way you see the Israel, can these tensions ultimately undermine the Israeli innovation engine?
Certainly, if they're not dealt with. But I am optimistic that in my own mind, I put this period in brackets. The period that began with the whole judicial crisis and then now the war. And I believe that we will get beyond this period and we will get to a place where we're much more able to heal and bring ourselves together and go back to building. And we can't do it now. The fact that we've been able to do it at all, that the tech sector has managed to kind of forge ahead as if nothing had happened if you look at it from outside. Um, is incredible. But, if we stay, if this current situation didn't end, we would be in huge trouble. We would be, but I think it will, and I think we will come back together. Not it won't be easy, and it'll take time, but basically, if you look at it in terms of, let's say, the height of the flames, let's say now we're at a 9 out of 10, and we could even go higher, 9.5. It's like it's a very stressful situation. But I think automatically, once we've gotten beyond this period, it's going to keep going down and down. Whether we can really come back together, kind of at a pioneering level, that's another story. That's a high bar, but I think we can come out of this.
Awesome. Let's take a few questions from the audience. Saul, I'm gonna read it out for you. Since the war is impacting Israel's startups to reach new international markets, thousands of high-tech young people doing relocation, restrictions to obtain investments for pre-seed and seed startups. Do you agree on this not funny situation and the difficulty to reverse it? So I guess the question is about, people kind of leaving the country, looking for quieter places around the world. What do you think about that? This is actually a major issue here.
Um, the numbers sound high when you talk about 8,000. It sounds high, but in relative terms, it's not very high. It's completely understandable, and it would be surprising if it weren't happening. I think a lot of people actually came back to Israel as a result of the war. I probably the net is out rather than in, but
Yeah.
still. Um, uh, and again, it's the brackets. It's a function of this time. I think that if we pull ourselves together again, and if we really start taking off again, more Israelis are going to come back. The net will definitely be an inflow. Um, so that's a result of the current situation, not something I see as permanent.
Not something to worry about, you say.
Oh, depends on whether we're able to fix things. I mean, yeah.
By the way, the numbers are around 400,000 people, like Israelis work in the tech ecosystem in Israel. And on average year, I think around 4,000 people leave the country and more or less the same amount come back. In the recent 2 years, the number has gone up to around 8,000 people. So it's a lot, but still, I guess if you compare it to 400,000, it's not too much. So another question from the audience. So how do you suggest the ecosystem should advance its capabilities in leading the field of artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, so AI and AGI as well?
Um, well, I think what we're already doing and the natural thing to do is to is the application layer, to just keep coming up with companies that find new uses for AI, and the existing companies, are all adding AI to whatever they're doing. That's kind of the obvious, the natural process, and we're doing that, and I think we're good at that, and we will be good at that. Um, the the question is whether we can do more than that. And like I said before, because it may depend on small numbers and not huge data centers, um, we may be able to. We may be able to contribute on sort of a global level. Actually, the way I would love for us to contribute is on the alignment problem. Um, I I think that we need to solve that, and I think that if somebody comes along and solves it, it will be that basically alignment isn't a one solution thing, just like cyber is not. There is no like Zbang Vigamarno with cyber. There's no one solution. There's endless numbers of companies and solutions. Cyber is an industry, and alignment can be an industry. And I would love for Israel to create and lead the alignment industry, because anybody who cracks, just like everything needs cyber, everything's going to need alignment. So if any of you are listening and thinking about what you want to do, that's something you might want to get into.
Awesome. And that you mentioned like do more, and that's like a great segue to the next question. How much of the societal drive to do more comes from its main religion's influence, Tikkun Olam? So I guess if I, hopefully you understand the question.
Yeah, I do. I think so. I think, it's not a coincidence that there's so many Israeli scientists, and, that we've been excellent in many fields. I think that is out of a drive to make the world better. It's not just to get ahead. I think that we do, as Jews, want to contribute to the world. And I think Israel really, again, has kind of taken that Jewish trait and doubled down on it. And again, it goes back to this issue of meaning. You can't really get a lot of meaning just by focusing on yourself. Meaning tends to come from things you're doing for others. It comes from your family. It comes from your impact, your contribution to the world. And that's why individualism has become so devastating for society, because it's devastating for meaning. And that means it's devastating for our health as people. People need, we are social animals. We evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to be with other people. And if we're not with other people, our body tells us physically, go back to the tribe. And it tells us that by making us depressed. That's like when you need to eat, your body tells you you're hungry, and so on. So we need that human connection. We're very good at that human connection. That's, I think, why we are happier, why we are less in despair. This is kind of if you have to say, what is the one explanation? That's it.
Got it. So I'm gonna take one more question, guys. When you're putting in questions in the chat box, like don't put like too many like long questions. Very difficult to actually read them. So I'm hopefully I'm going to try to summarize one of the questions here. So I guess the question about startups moving from Israel to the US, like penetrating the US market. And the question, I guess, is like, what's the best strategy for Israelis to penetrate the US market, in your opinion?
Well, this has been our specialty for a long time. I mean, this is what Startup Nation is built on. There's so many Israeli startups in New York and Silicon Valley. I mean, tons. And the standard trajectory is, you build something here, and then you move to the US, you have all your sales over there, you have your R&D here, and that's the pattern. And I think we're very, what I say is there's kind of a highway between Israel and Silicon Valley. We know who to call, they know who to call, we know each other very well. What I would like actually is to build that with other countries. I think we're too US focused. There's a big world out there. It's not just the United States. And we are actually in that world as opposed to Americans who are in the US. So it's a little bit odd that we're focused on competing with Americans for the US market, when we could be, a little bit more active and focused on other markets.
Right. So there's not a question here, but it's too long for me to actually be able to read and understand. But I'll try to take something from that. It's talking about the fact that the startup nation in Israel behaves like a very closed ecosystem. you need to, to graduate from the Technion, you need to serve in A200, and it's not really open to other things. So how do you see that ecosystem, like very closed ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a strength and a weakness. So, you know, the fact that a lot of startups are people who served in the same unit, so they know how to work together really well, and they complement each other, and so on and so forth, which is very important for like a founding team. On the other hand, if you go to Silicon Valley, you go into a startup, you got people there from all over the world. Silicon Valley is a very international place. Here, you go in the startup and you have a bunch of guys from the same unit. That should not be. We should have more international looking startups. We should, and this is drives me crazy that people don't think this way, but we can be a magnet the way Silicon Valley can be a magnet. We don't leverage our ability. We don't understand how much people all over the world look at Israel as startup nation, as a place, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's a great place to go. We got nice beaches, and it's like food's great and so on. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's very lonely in most countries. Nobody is, it's very small. Here we have this massive ecosystem, and it's so normal. Every throw a stone and you hit a guy with a laptop doing a startup. It's like, and that's very helpful if you're an entrepreneur. We don't leverage that. I wish we would. I wish we would, create a visa system that would really make it easy for people to come work here, even start companies here. So that's it. I see it more of a weakness than a strength that we are relatively insular.
Yeah, and by the way, Israel is considered to be the third best place in the world to start a startup, right after Silicon Valley and New York. So that's not sure how many people actually know that. And that's also like a great segue to the next question I'm taking from the audience here. So can we still talk about abroad, about the startup nation under the current circumstances, or should we actually talk about technology as a whatever, kind of hide the fact that this is like Israeli startups?
You mean, are we? I mean, a lot of people ask,
Yeah, given like the global, what we're seeing globally with antisemitism and all the hate around what's happening in Israel right now, is it like still a good advice or like a good term to use? Like, yeah, we're coming from Israel. This is like the startup nation, or should we kind of hide for a few years and just talk about technology?
So I think that the entrepreneurs, the companies are feeling their way in this. Some are more open, some are less open. I think in general, um, uh, you know, when we wrote Startup Nation, we thought, okay, this is a very pro-Israel book. Of course, we're going to get a lot of pushback. It's going to be rough. It's not going to be easy out there. And turned out, that didn't happen at all. Even the worst newspapers in the world, were writing great pieces about Startup Nation and stuff. Because when you change the conversation, when it's about something that people actually care about, when it's about Israel as a country, not just a conflict, people are open. Now, of course, there are going to be people there's going to be haters. Of course, the people who were boycotting us before are still going to boycott us. But I do think that to some extent it's temporary, and also even now, look, the Wiz exit is an example of how people are not shy when it comes to something they really care about, which is innovation.
Yeah. Awesome. We're gonna run out of time in like 3 minutes, so I'm gonna ask you like one last final question, and then we're gonna wrap up. So, if you had one message for global investors about why now is the time to double down on Israel, despite the noise, the challenge, and the headline. So what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's just as I said before, if you take all of the recipe of things that make Israel a startup nation and you intensify all of them, you intensify the drive and motivation, you intensify the it's these soft things that really matter. It's not that, in 8200 you learn how to program and stuff. There are a lot of people who know how to program in the world. It's the soft things. It's the ability to how to work as a team, to be mission oriented, to be kind of balanced between chaos and focus, that we're actually quite good at. Um, and it's just been turned. The dial has just been turned up, because of the war. So, I think that it's time to double down. And I think actually the investors, the VCs are seeing this. They're seeing this in the entrepreneurs coming through.
I couldn't agree more. So thank you very much for this epic session. It was super, super, first of all, optimistic and of course, very, very interesting. So thank you very much for this. Everyone, thank you very much for joining. I wish us all happy Passover and spring holidays wherever you are. Hopefully, good news to everyone, and let hopefully the hostages come back home soon. And thank you for joining, and see you next time. Thank you, Saul.
Thank you.
Bye bye.